80 samurai, 80 warriors of flesh, bone, and blood, standing before a horizon that grows dark with 20,000 Mongol soldiers. Komoda Beach on the island of Tsushima is moments away from becoming a killing field. The date is November 18th, 1274 AD. The samurai world, as it has existed for generations, has precisely 3 hours left to live. But to understand this massacre, we must travel backward 7 years in time. Because this slaughter doesn't begin with blood and steel. It begins with ink on parchment. The year is 1267. A messenger arrives upon the shores of Japan, carried by waves from the west. He brings with him a document sealed with the imperial seal of Kublai Khan, the most powerful man walking the earth. He is the grandson of Genghis Khan, the emperor who has subjugated all of China, who has brought Korea to its knees, who has expanded the largest empire the world has ever witnessed. And now his gaze turns eastward to 4 islands floating in the sea. 4 islands that the Mongols call the land where the sun rises, Japan. The letter's message is simple, brutally, devastatingly simple. Since ancient times, it reads, the rulers of small countries have sought to maintain friendly relations with those who rule great nations. We, having conquered all of China and all of Korea, now extend our hand across the waters to your shores. Send ambassadors, pay tribute, or face the consequences that will follow. This is not an invitation to negotiate. This is a death sentence wrapped in diplomatic language. The letter reaches the Kamakura shogunate at last. The military government that controls Japan reads the words once, then reads them again, and then does something that no other kingdom conquered by the Mongols has ever dared to do. Something that defies all military logic, all diplomatic wisdom, all common sense. They ignore it completely. Absolutely. Total silence. No ambassadors cross the sea, no tribute is sent. Not even a polite response saying, "Thank you for your interest, but no." Nothing, only silence. Kublai Khan is not a man accustomed to being ignored. He sends another letter, and another after that. For 6 long years, Mongol messengers make the perilous crossing of the Sea of Japan, carrying the same message, each time worded more threateningly than the last. 6 years of ignored warnings, 6 years of wasted diplomatic opportunities. 6 years during which Japan essentially tells the most powerful empire the world has ever seen. We are not interested in your friendship. We are not interested in your trade routes. And we are most definitely not interested in becoming your vassal state. Is this absolute bravery? Or is it suicidal arrogance? Because here lies the fundamental problem. Japan has never been invaded, not once, not ever. In all the centuries of its recorded history, no foreign army has successfully set foot upon its shores with conquest in mind. The samurai are formidable warriors, yes, this much is true. But their combat experience is limited exclusively to internal civil wars, conflicts between Japanese clans fighting one another. They understand the rules of Bushido, the sacred warrior code. They know about one-on-one combat, about honor on the battlefield, about announcing your name and lineage before engaging an opponent in mortal combat. The Mongols have absolutely no idea what Bushido is, and they don't care to learn. While Japan remains wrapped in its proud, defiant silence, Kublai Khan is preparing something that the Japanese cannot even begin to imagine. In the ports of Korea, specifically in Masan and in Happo Bay, an invasion fleet is being constructed. 900 ships. 900 vessels of war that will transport 15,000 Mongol and Chinese warriors, plus 8,000 Korean soldiers forced to join the invasion force. 23,000 men in total. They carry weapons that Japan has never seen, tactics the samurai don't understand, and a military discipline forged through conquests stretching from Eastern Europe all the way to the Pacific shores. The Mongols don't fight with honor in mind. They fight exclusively to win. They use poison on the tips of their arrows. They attack in coordinated groups. They don't announce their names before striking, and they possess something that will terrify the samurai more than any sword ever could. Gunpowder bombs. Iron spheres filled with explosive materials that they launch using catapults. When these weapons explode, metal fragments fly outward in all directions, tearing through flesh and shattering bone. The sound is deafening. The psychological effect is devastating beyond measure. Japan knows absolutely nothing about this. While the Mongols construct their armada piece by piece, the samurai train with their katanas, perfecting their archery, meditating on concepts of honor and dignified death. They have no conception that honor itself is about to become completely irrelevant. October 1274, the fleet sets sail from the Korean coast. 900 ships sailing eastward across dark waters. Their destination, the island of Tsushima. Why Tsushima specifically? First, because it serves as the gateway to Japan, a relatively small island positioned between Korea and the main island of Kyushu. If you conquer Tsushima, you gain a base of operations, a foothold from which to launch the final assault on mainland Japan. On Tsushima live approximately 80 permanent samurai under the command of the Jito, the military governor, a man named So Sukekuni. 80 warriors to defend an entire island. They have wives, children, peasants living under their protection. They have temples, rice fields, a way of life that has existed and flourished for generations upon generations. And now, on November 18th, they watch as the horizon darkens. This is not a storm approaching. These are sails. Hundreds upon hundreds of sails. The Mongol fleet appears like a nightmare made manifest, made real, made flesh. The lookouts positioned on the coast run to inform Sukekuni immediately. The governor climbs to the top of a cliff and looks outward. He begins counting the ships. 10, 20, 50, 100. He cannot count them all. There are simply too many. Sukekuni understands basic mathematics. 80 warriors against thousands. The options before him are brutally clear. Surrender the island, flee across the strait to Kyushu, and warn the shogunate of what approaches. Or do the unthinkable, stay here, fight here, die here. Here is the moral dilemma that defines everything that follows, everything that matters. What possesses more value, life or honor? Because Sukekuni and his men know with absolute certainty that they are going to die. There exists no doubt about this outcome. But if they flee, if they choose life, Tsushima falls without any resistance whatsoever. The Mongols gain a secure base of operations. And most importantly, if there is no resistance, if no one fights back, the shogunate in Kyushu won't know how enormous the threat truly is. They won't know they need to mobilize the entire country. They won't understand that this isn't a group of pirates conducting raids. This is a full-scale invasion by the world's most powerful military force. Sukekuni makes his decision. They will stay, they will fight. And in the process, they will send a message that will take days to reach Kyushu. But when it arrives, it will be crystal clear. Japan is under attack, and the enemy is unstoppable. The Mongol fleet lands on Komoda Beach. The first boats touch the sand with a grinding sound. The warriors jump down into the shallow water, and this is the moment when the nightmare materializes fully for the samurai. These are not individual warriors seeking honorable duels. This is a military machine operating with perfect precision. They advance in formation, shields positioned in front, archers stationed behind, moving as a single organism. One samurai, following every tradition he has ever learned, rides forward. His name is Takazaki Suenaga, one of the warriors from Tsushima. He rides at the very front of the defensive line. He shouts his name at the top of his lungs, declaring his lineage, his clan, his honor. He expects a Mongol warrior to respond in kind. He expects an honorable duel, warrior to warrior. Instead, he receives a rain of arrows descending from the sky like deadly precipitation. The Mongols don't hesitate for a single moment. They don't respond with words. They simply shoot, mechanically, efficiently. Hundreds of arrows darken the sky above Suenaga. He feels 3 impacts almost simultaneously. One arrow pierces his shoulder, another embeds itself in his thigh. The third arrow kills his horse instantly. The animal collapses. Suenaga falls hard, rolls across the wet sand. He is going to die right here on this beach without ever having crossed swords with anyone, without the honor he expected. But Suenaga doesn't die. Not yet. Not now. One of his companions, a samurai named Shiraishi Michiyasu, witnesses the scene unfolding. He rides straight into the Mongol line, shouting challenges, attempting to create a distraction, to draw their fire. The Mongols turn their attention to him. Michiyasu falls beneath a storm of arrows. But in those precious, crucial seconds, Suenaga manages to crawl away from the immediate battlefield, bleeding, wounded, but alive. He will survive this day. He will become one of the very few direct witnesses of what is about to happen next. The 80 samurai are being systematically massacred. This is not a battle between warriors. This is an organized execution carried out with military precision. The Mongols don't fight as individuals seeking glory. They fight as a coordinated unit with a single purpose. When a samurai charges forward, 10 Mongol warriors immediately surround him, attacking from all angles simultaneously. No duels, no honor, just brutal, devastating efficiency. And then the samurai hear something they have never heard before in their entire lives. A high-pitched whistle cutting through the air, followed by an explosion that shakes the very earth beneath their feet. The gunpowder bombs. Iron spheres roughly the size of a human head fly through the air, launched from catapults positioned on the Mongol ships offshore. When these weapons impact the ground, they explode with a noise so deafening it seems to come from the gods themselves. Fire erupts outward. Metal fragments fly in every direction like 1,000 invisible knives, seeking flesh. Horses panic and bolt in terror. Men scream in confusion and pain. Some of these samurai have never heard an explosion in their entire lives. They believe it must be magic, sorcery. They think these are the thunderbolts of angry gods made manifest. But the truth is worse than magic. This is technology. This is the tangible difference between a civilization that has existed in constant warfare against half the known world and an isolated island nation that has fought only against itself. Sukakuni watches as his men fall one by one, cut down by arrows, crushed by coordinated Mongol tactics, torn apart by exploding bombs. He watches the Mongol formation advance like an unstoppable tide, inevitable as the ocean itself. He grips his katana tightly. There exists a samurai tradition for moments like this. When defeat becomes inevitable, when there is no possibility of escape, a warrior can choose to die fighting against the enemy, or he can choose to die by his own hand, seppuku, ritual suicide. To die with dignity intact rather than being executed like an animal. Sukekuni chooses neither of these traditional paths. Instead, he charges directly into the very center of the Mongol formation, katana raised high. His remaining men follow him without hesitation. 23 samurai in one final desperate charge against impossible odds. They shout their defiance. They wield their katanas with everything they possess. They throw themselves against a wall of shields and spears. None of them survive. The Battle of Komoda lasts less than 3 hours from beginning to end. 80 samurai lie dead on the blood-soaked sand. The Mongols have casualties, yes, but they are minimal. Perhaps 100 men lost, perhaps even fewer. The victory is so complete, so total, that the Mongols don't even consider this a real battle in their chronicles. For them, this was merely a warm-up exercise, a preliminary skirmish. Now they control the beach completely. They begin disembarking the rest of their force without opposition. 20,000 warriors step onto Japanese soil for the first time in recorded history, and the true invasion of Tsushima begins in earnest. The Mongols don't waste a single moment. They divide their forces with practiced efficiency. One group advances into the interior of the island, searching systematically for villages, temples, any sign of remaining resistance. Another group secures the coastal areas, establishing a defensive perimeter. A third group immediately begins constructing fortifications, because here lies the genuine genius of the Mongol military strategy. They don't merely invade territories, they conquer and then they stay, building infrastructure to ensure permanent control. The villagers of Tsushima hear the Mongol war drums echoing through the hills, reverberating off the mountains. They see the smoke rising from enemy campfires. They know with certainty that the 80 samurai will never return home. Some families flee deeper into the interior of the island, hiding in dense forests and natural caves. Others attempt to escape in small fishing boats, rowing desperately toward Kyushu. Many of these refugees don't make it. The Mongols patrol the waters surrounding the island, capturing those attempting to flee. And this is where Mongol brutality reveals itself in its full, terrible magnitude. Because the Mongols don't simply kill enemy soldiers, they employ a psychological terror tactic that they have perfected through 40 years of conquests across the known world. Make the next target surrender before you even arrive. How do you accomplish this? By ensuring that survivors spread stories so terrifying, so horrific, that no one wants to resist. The Mongols take prisoners, hundreds of civilians, women, children, elderly people, Buddhist priests. They bind these prisoners with ropes, and then they do something that will be seared into Japanese collective memory for centuries to come. They pierce the palms of their captives' hands with sharp instruments, thread ropes through the bleeding holes, and hang these prisoners from the sides of their ships like human banners, like flags made of flesh. Imagine this scene. Imagine being a defender on the next island, standing watch, looking toward the horizon and seeing the Mongol fleet approaching with bodies hanging from the sides of every ship. people who are still alive, still conscious, people who are screaming in agony. That is the message being sent. This fate awaits you if you choose to resist. Some prisoners are beheaded on the beach. Their severed heads are piled in pyramids as warnings to anyone who might consider fighting back. The Mongols maintain a macabre counting system, tallying their kills like a harvest. Tsushima falls completely within 2 days, just 2 days to conquer an entire island. The few samurai who remain in remote villages attempt to organize some form of resistance. They fight with courage and desperation. They die to the last man. There is no epic poetry in these deaths, no songs composed in their honor, only blood mixing with mud and bodies left unburied for the crows. But something crucial has happened during these chaotic hours. Something the Mongols didn't plan for, didn't anticipate. Before dying, before making his final charge, Sukekuni managed to send a messenger. A single rider escaped during the first hours of the attack. This man crossed the strait to Kyushu in a small, barely seaworthy boat. He arrived at the city of Dazaifu, the administrative capital of Kyushu, carrying news that seems absolutely impossible to believe. An immense fleet, he reports, thousands upon thousands of warriors, weapons that explode like thunder from the heavens. Tsushima has fallen completely. The governor of Dazaifu, a man named Shoni Tsunesuke, hears this report delivered by an exhausted, traumatized messenger. His first reaction is complete disbelief. An invasion? A real invasion? 6 full years have passed since the last threatening letter arrived from Kublai Khan. 6 years of absolute silence from the Mongol Empire. Many officials in the shogunate had convinced themselves that the Mongol emperor had forgotten about Japan entirely, that he was too occupied consolidating his control over China, that the threats contained in those letters were merely empty words designed to intimidate. Tsunesuke now understands the terrible truth. Those threats were not empty at all. They were promises, and promises are being kept. He immediately mobilizes everything at his disposal. He sends urgent messengers riding at full speed toward Kamakura, the capital of the shogunate, hundreds of kilometers away. He orders all available samurai throughout the Kyushu region to concentrate their forces along the coastline. He begins the emergency evacuation of villages located near the sea. He orders his subordinates to prepare whatever defenses can be constructed quickly. But here lies the fundamental problem that Japan faces. Japan does not possess a unified standing army. There is no system of mass conscription. The samurai are elite warriors, highly trained and deadly, but they are few in number. Perhaps 3,000 samurai exist in the entire Kyushu region, 3,000 warriors against 20,000 Mongol invaders, and the Mongols are already advancing, already moving to their next target. After securing complete control of Tsushima, the massive fleet sets sail once more. Their next target, the island of Iki, located only 50 kilometers from Tsushima, positioned even closer to mainland Kyushu. If Iki falls to Mongol control, they will stand at the very gates of Japan proper. Iki is considerably larger than Tsushima. It has a larger population, more resources, and more defenders. Approximately 120 samurai serve under the command of the Jito, a warrior named Taira Kagetaka. Kagetaka has already received the news about what happened on Tsushima. A messenger arrived ahead of the fleet. They told him everything in graphic detail: the Mongol formations, the exploding bombs, the total massacre, the bodies hanging from ships. Kagetaka faces a decision, the exact same terrible decision that Sukekuni faced days earlier. Stay and die fighting, or flee and live to fight another day. But Kagetaka possesses something that Sukekuni did not have: time. Days of advance warning, days to prepare. He can organize a genuine defense. He can choose the terrain carefully. He can force the Mongols to pay a steep price for every meter of land they take. Or he can evacuate, take his men, take their families, take as many civilians as possible, and escape to Kyushu before the fleet arrives. Save lives rather than sacrificing them for abstract concepts of honor. Kagetaka chooses honor over life. He chooses to stay and fight. He orders his men to prepare barricades along the most likely landing beaches. He organizes archers in defensive positions in the surrounding hills. He evacuates women and children to the interior of the island, to temples and hastily constructed fortresses, and then he waits for the inevitable. November 20th, 1274. The Mongol fleet appears on the horizon off Iki. Kagetaka stands on a cliff and watches. The same 900 ships, the same overwhelming force. He sees the bodies still hanging from the sides of many vessels, swaying grotesquely with the motion of the waves. He recognizes some of the faces, people from Tsushima he had met at festivals, at ceremonies, at peaceful gatherings, that now seem to belong to another lifetime entirely. The landing operation begins with practiced efficiency. The Mongols have already perfected their tactics. First comes the bombardment with the explosive spheres. The catapults positioned on the ships launch dozens of bombs toward the coastline. They explode among the defenders with tremendous force. Horses flee in absolute terror. Then come waves of archers. Thousands upon thousands of arrows darken the sky like a plague of locusts. The samurai take cover behind their improvised barricades, shields raised, and finally the infantry assault. The Mongol warriors charge from their boats, but this time they encounter organized resistance rather than confusion. Kagetaka has divided his men into small mobile groups rather than concentrating them in one location. They don't charge forward like madmen rushing towards certain death. Instead, they position themselves at strategic points throughout the island: hills with commanding views, narrow passes where Mongol numerical superiority counts for less, defensive positions chosen carefully over days of preparation. The strategy works. For a few precious hours, it actually works. The Mongols take control of the beach, yes. But when they attempt to advance inland, the samurai counterattack from the flanks. Quick, devastating ambushes. They strike hard and then retreat before being surrounded. They strike again from a different direction and retreat again. They kill dozens of Mongols, perhaps even hundreds, inflicting real casualties. But the Mongols number 20,000 strong, and they have all day to fight, all week if necessary. The Mongol formations adapt with disturbing speed to these guerrilla tactics. They send out scouts to detect ambushes before they occur. They surround the defensive positions systematically, and little by little, methodically, remorselessly, they crush every point of resistance on the island. The 120 samurai become 100, then 80, then 60, then 40. Kagetaka himself is wounded, an arrow in his side, another embedded in his leg. He bleeds profusely, but continues giving orders, continues directing his men. He regroups the survivors at a small fortress in the center of the island. It's a structure built from wood, never designed to withstand a serious siege. It won't hold for long. But maybe, just maybe, it can last until nightfall. And in the darkness, perhaps some of his men can escape, can slip through Mongol lines and carry the warning to Kyushu. The Mongols surround the fortress completely. They don't attack immediately. They possess no sense of urgency whatsoever. They wait. They let fear grow among the defenders. They let the trapped men hear the screams of captured civilians being tortured. They let the samurai imagine what horrors are coming for them. Then they launch the bombs, one after another in steady succession. The fortress burns. The wooden walls explode into splinters. Kagetaka emerges with his last 20 men, those who can still fight. He charges one final time. He doesn't shout his name anymore. He doesn't seek an honorable duel. He simply fights with everything he has left. He manages to kill 3 Mongol warriors with his katana before a spear pierces through his armor, through his flesh. He falls to his knees. He tries to rise, to stand one more time. He cannot. A Mongol soldier approaches slowly, raises his sword above his head. Kagetaka closes his eyes and waits for the end. Iki falls in a single day. 120 samurai dead. Thousands of civilians captured. The same atrocities repeat themselves. Hands pierced with ropes threaded through. Heads severed and piled. Bodies hung from the ships as warnings. 2 islands conquered. 200 samurai annihilated in less than a week of fighting. And now the Mongol fleet, swollen with confidence, turns its attention toward Kyushu, toward the heart of Japan itself. November 23rd, 1274. The 900 ships arrive at Hakata Bay on the northern coast of Kyushu. It is the largest amphibious landing operation in Japanese history. 20,000 Mongol warriors prepared to face approximately 3,000 samurai scattered throughout the region. The mathematics remains brutally unfavorable. But something has changed in these crucial days. The samurai of Kyushu have had time to prepare, time to think, time to learn. They have heard the detailed reports from the few survivors. They know now that traditional samurai tactics don't work against this enemy. They understand that individual honor, while glorious, will get them killed without accomplishing anything. For the first time in their long history, Japanese samurai must adapt their centuries-old traditions or face complete extinction. And most importantly, they understand what stands behind them. If Kyushu falls, then Japan falls. There are no more islands to retreat to, no more time to prepare. It is here or it is never. The Mongols land at Hakata. The beach is wide and sandy, perfect terrain for a massive landing operation. The bombs explode with terrifying regularity. Arrows fly in dark clouds. Formations advance with mechanical precision. The Mongols expect another easy massacre, another quick victory. Instead, they encounter something unexpected, something new. The samurai don't charge forward individually. They don't shout their names seeking duels. They hold their positions. They wait. And when the Mongols advance close enough, the samurai counterattack in coordinated waves rather than individual charges. They don't fight alone anymore. They fight in groups, supporting one another. The coordination is clumsy and improvised. These warriors have trained for individual combat their entire lives. But it works better than heroic suicide charges. The Mongols continue advancing, yes, but they pay a price now. For every kilometer of ground they conquer, they lose dozens of men. The beach becomes a slaughterhouse for both sides rather than a one-sided massacre. Night finally falls across the battlefield. The Mongols control the coastal area, but they haven't penetrated deep into Kyushu territory. They regroup their forces. They light campfires, tend to their wounded, plan the final assault for the following morning. The samurai retreat to the nearby hills. They are exhausted, wounded, bleeding, but they are alive. They have survived the first day. And then the sky begins to change. The clouds turn black, dense, swirling. The wind begins to blow from the sea with a force that bends trees nearly horizontal, that tears branches from trunks. The Mongols on the beach look toward the horizon with growing concern. Something is approaching, something massive and unstoppable. It is a storm, but not just any ordinary storm. It is a typhoon, a Pacific hurricane that has been forming for days in the open waters far from land. And now, on the night of November 23rd, 1274, it strikes Hakata Bay with absolutely devastating fury. The waves grow impossibly tall, 3 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters. The 900 Mongol ships anchored in the bay begin crashing into one another with terrible force. Sailors frantically attempt to cut anchor lines, to move their vessels away from the dangerous coast, to sail toward deeper waters where the waves might be less deadly. But it's already too late. The wind pushes the ships like toys. The waves drag them wherever the ocean wills. Ships crash against rocks and split in half. Mongol warriors sleeping on the decks are thrown into the churning water. Those trapped below deck find themselves imprisoned when the ships begin to sink rapidly, unable to escape, drowning in darkness. The ocean swallows hundreds of vessels within a matter of hours. On land, the Mongol warriors who have already disembarked find themselves trapped in a nightmare. The wind blows so violently that grown men cannot stand upright. Tents are ripped from the ground and thrown into the darkness. Campfires are extinguished instantly by horizontal rain. Rain falls like spears thrown by angry gods, each drop striking with force. And in the total darkness, unable to see even 3 meters ahead through the storm, the Mongols hear something worse than thunder, worse than the screaming wind. They hear the samurai attacking under cover of the storm. The Japanese warriors know this terrain intimately. They can move in complete darkness like ghosts, like spirits. They fall upon the Mongol camps without warning. They kill and then disappear back into the storm. They attack again at another location entirely. The Mongols cannot form their defensive formations in these conditions. They cannot use their coordinated tactics. They are blind, soaking wet, terrified. Dawn finally breaks on November 24th. The storm continues, though with slightly less intensity than during the darkest hours of night. The samurai return to their positions in the hills and look down toward the bay. What they see appears apocalyptic, like a vision of the end of the world. The entire coast is covered in wreckage, shattered wood, floating corpses, capsized ships. Of the 900 vessels that arrived with such confidence, perhaps 300 remain afloat. Perhaps fewer. The Mongol warriors still alive on land are completely demoralized. Without ships to return home, they are trapped in enemy territory. Without supplies, they will starve within days. Without reinforcements, they will be massacred by the samurai who grow stronger with every passing hour. The Mongol commander, a general named Kim Bangjing, makes a desperate decision: immediate retreat. Abandon this cursed shore. He orders all survivors to return to whatever ships remain seaworthy. They abandon their equipment, they abandon their wounded comrades, leaving them to die or be captured. They abandon all pretense of conquering Kyushu. The battered fleet sets sail back toward Korea, limping across the sea. Of the 20,000 warriors who arrived with such confidence, approximately 13,000 return home. 7,000 men dead, most not from glorious battle, but from drowning in a storm. The Japanese watch the ships disappear over the horizon. They cannot believe what they're witnessing. They have won. Not through tactical superiority, not through superior numbers or weapons. They won because of weather, because of pure, inexplicable fortune. Or perhaps it wasn't mere fortune. Perhaps it was something more profound. In the temples throughout Kyushu, Buddhist monks and Shinto priests have been praying without ceasing since the moment they learned of the invasion. Praying for divine protection, praying for a miracle from the gods. And precisely when everything seemed lost, when the Mongols appeared ready to overrun all of Japan, the storm arrived. The Japanese give this wind a name. They call it kamikaze, the divine wind. The wind sent by the gods themselves to protect Japan from foreign invasion. It is the birth of a national myth that will endure for 700 years. But here is the question that no one wants to ask, the question that makes everyone uncomfortable. What happens when the gods don't send a second miracle? Because Kublai Khan is far from finished. The 1274 invasion was merely the first attempt, a reconnaissance in force, a test. Now he knows that Japan is vulnerable. He knows that samurai can be defeated. He knows that with more men, more ships, better planning, and better timing, he can conquer these islands. And he has 7 full years to prepare properly this time. In Japan, the Kamakura shogunate exists in a state of near panic. They won, yes, but barely. Tsushima destroyed. Iki razed to the ground. Thousands of civilians dead or captured. If the Mongols return with a significantly larger force, Japan will not survive. The regent of the shogunate, a young man named Hojo Tokimune, orders total mobilization of the entire nation. He commands the construction of defensive walls along the entire coast of Kyushu. He demands the recruitment and training of more samurai. He requires training in new tactics, tactics that abandon some traditional concepts of individual honor in favor of survival. For the first time in its history, Japan prepares for total war against an external enemy rather than internal conflicts. The walls begin rising at Hakata, 2-meter-high stone structures surrounding the entire bay. The strategic plan is for both fleets to rendezvous off the coasts of Kyushu and attack simultaneously in overwhelming force. It represents the most ambitious logistical coordination of the medieval era, a feat of planning that staggers the imagination. And from the very beginning, absolutely everything goes wrong. The Korean fleet arrives first in early June. It doesn't wait for the Chinese fleet to arrive as planned. The commander, a general named Hong Da-gu, makes a fateful decision to attack immediately rather than waiting. His reasoning seems simple and logical. If they wait, the Japanese will have even more time to prepare their defenses. Better to strike quickly while maintaining momentum. They attack the islands of Tsushima and Iki once again, but this time conditions have changed dramatically. The Japanese have evacuated all civilians from both islands. They left behind only military garrisons of samurai trained specifically for guerrilla warfare, for ambush tactics. The Mongols land on the beaches. The samurai attack from concealment in the forests, launching constant ambushes, hit-and-run raids. The Mongols eventually take control of both islands, yes, but they lose hundreds of men in the brutal process. They continue onward to Kyushu. They arrive at Hakata Bay, and they see the walls rising before them. 2 meters of solid stone surrounding the entire bay. Behind these walls, thousands of samurai archers wait patiently, arrows notched. There is no way to land without suffering massive casualties. Hong Da-gu orders a frontal assault anyway, despite the obvious difficulty. The Mongols attempt to cross the distance from their boats to the walls. They jump from vessels, run across the beach toward the stone barriers under an absolutely devastating rain of arrows. Some warriors manage to reach the walls. They attempt to climb. The samurai waiting above push them backward with spears, with swords, with rocks. Bodies begin piling up at the foot of the walls. The Mongols retreat back to their ships, having accomplished nothing except losing men. Hong Da-gu realizes quickly that he cannot take Hakata through direct assault, not with his current forces. He needs the Chinese fleet. He needs those additional 100,000 men to surround the defenses completely, to attack from multiple points simultaneously, to overwhelm the defenders through sheer numerical superiority. But the Chinese fleet doesn't arrive on schedule. It's delayed by storms in the East China Sea. Logistical problems plague the massive operation. Coordinating 2 separate fleets separated by thousands of kilometers of ocean is proving nearly impossible with 13th century technology and communication methods. Hong Da-gu waits. His 40,000 men remain trapped aboard ships anchored off a hostile coastline. Days pass slowly, then weeks. The summer heat becomes brutal, oppressive. Drinking water begins running short. Food supplies dwindle. Men start getting sick. Dysentery, fevers, diseases that spread rapidly in the cramped, unsanitary conditions aboard wooden ships baking under the relentless Japanese sun. Being crammed together on vessels under these conditions creates a perfect environment for plague. And the samurai don't simply wait passively behind their walls. They organize daring night attacks. Small boats carrying 10 or 20 warriors approach the Mongol fleet stealthily under cover of darkness. They board the ships silently, kill the crew members before they can raise alarms, set fire to sails and rigging, then escape back to shore before reinforcements can arrive. The Mongols begin calling these raiders the pirates of the night. They don't fight with any sense of honor. They attack during the darkest hours, kill silently from shadows, and disappear like ghosts. It's psychologically terrifying. Mongol sailors cannot sleep peacefully. Every small sound in the darkness could be a samurai climbing silently aboard to slit throats. Finally, in mid-July, the Chinese fleet arrives at last. 3,600 ships carrying 100,000 fresh soldiers who haven't been sitting in the heat for weeks. Hong Da-gu feels overwhelming relief. Now they can launch the massive coordinated assault, land at multiple points around the bay, overwhelm the defenders with pure numbers. But his original 40,000 men are utterly exhausted. They have been at sea for weeks under terrible conditions. Many are sick. Morale has dropped to rock bottom, and the newly arrived Chinese soldiers don't know the local terrain, don't understand how the Japanese fight, have never faced samurai in battle. Hong Da-gu makes what seems like a reasonable tactical decision. He chooses to wait a few more days to allow time for regrouping, for planning the coordinated attack properly, for his men to recover some strength. It's a sensible military decision based on sound strategic thinking. It's also the decision that dooms the entire invasion. Because on August 14th, the sky darkens once more. Clouds roll in from the south, black clouds, dense and ominous, swirling in spiraling patterns that experienced sailors recognize immediately with growing dread. Another typhoon, bigger than the one 7 years earlier, much, much bigger. The Mongol commanders immediately panic. They shout orders to weigh anchors, to set sail toward deeper waters, where the waves will be less dangerous than near the rocky coastline. But 4,500 ships don't move quickly or efficiently. Some vessels are anchored too close to one another. Others have anchors that have become stuck in the sea floor. Still others simply don't have enough healthy sailors remaining to operate them properly. The wind begins blowing, softly at first, then stronger, then with a force that literally rips masts from decks like twigs. The waves grow to impossible, terrifying heights, 15 meters, 20 meters. Mountains of water that lift the ships like children's toys and smash them against rocks with devastating force. Hong Da-gu stands on his flagship, desperately trying to coordinate the retreat, shouting orders that no one can hear over the screaming wind. He sees a giant wave approaching, a wall of water taller than any building. He shouts warnings. No one can hear him. The wave strikes the ship with the force of a god's fist. The vessel capsizes instantly. Hong Da-gu plunges into the churning water. He tries to swim against currents that pull him under. He disappears beneath the waves. His body is never recovered. On land, the samurai watch from behind their walls, unable to fully believe what they're witnessing. The largest fleet in all of human history is being systematically destroyed before their eyes by the raw power of nature, ships splitting completely in half, men jumping into the ocean only to drown within seconds, the water filled with debris, with corpses, with shredded flags and broken wood. The storm continues its relentless assault for 2 full days. 2 days of constant wind, of horizontal rain, of waves that literally redesign the coastline. When the sun finally rises on August 16th, Hakata Bay resembles a vast cemetery more than a harbor. Thousands upon thousands of corpses float in the water. Shipwreckage covers kilometers of beach in every direction. And of the 4,500 vessels that compose the invasion fleet, the largest armada ever assembled in medieval warfare, fewer than 300 remain even marginally seaworthy. The Mongol survivors find themselves trapped in enemy territory without any means of returning home, without food supplies, without drinking water. Some attempt to surrender, swimming toward shore with their hands raised high in submission. The samurai execute them without mercy or hesitation. No prisoners will be taken this time, not after what happened on Tsushima, not after the pierced hands, not after the severed heads piled as warnings. Other survivors attempt to build improvised rafts using wreckage from destroyed ships. Most of these rafts sink before even leaving the bay. The few that manage to get away from the immediate coast face death from dehydration or are captured by Japanese fishermen who hand them over to samurai patrols. For weeks following the storm, Japanese warriors methodically scour the beaches and forests, searching for Mongols hiding in caves, in abandoned villages, anywhere they might seek shelter. They hunt these survivors like animals. Some of the trapped Mongols choose suicide before capture. Others attempt to fight to the very end. None successfully return home to tell their tale. Of the 140,000 warriors who departed from China and Korea with confidence in their superiority, approximately 20,000 return alive. 120,000 men dead. The vast majority drowned in the storm. Some were executed after capture. Others simply disappeared in the chaos, their fates unknown and unknowable. It is the most catastrophic naval defeat in history up to that point. Larger than Salamis, larger than Actium, an entire fleet wiped from existence in merely 2 days of natural fury. Kublai Khan receives the devastating news in his palace in Dadu, modern Beijing. Historical records claim he remained silent for hours upon hearing the report, simply staring into space. Then he ordered the execution of several surviving commanders, men who had failed in their duty. China finds itself essentially bankrupt after investing enormous resources in building 2 giant fleets that both ended up at the bottom of the ocean. Korea lies devastated from the demands placed upon it, and most significantly, the Mongols, who have conquered half the known world, now fear the Japanese Sea. Surviving sailors spread stories throughout the empire. They claim the Japanese gods protect those waters, that any fleet attempting invasion will be destroyed by divine intervention, that Japan is literally untouchable, protected by forces beyond human understanding. Superstition spreads rapidly through the Mongol ranks. No commander wants to lead a third invasion attempt. No one wants to face the kamikaze wind again. Kublai Khan dies in 1294. His dream of conquering Japan dies with him. No emperor who follows him ever attempts another invasion. For the next 650 years, until World War II, no foreign power even tries to invade Japan. And within Japan itself, the kamikaze becomes far more than a historical event. It becomes a fundamental national myth. Temples celebrate it annually. Priests preach about it in sermons. Samurai invoke it before battles. The gods protect Japan. This becomes an unshakable belief, a cornerstone of national identity. It's a belief that will endure for centuries, that will shape how Japanese people understand themselves and their place in the world, that will convince them their country is literally indestructible, blessed by divine forces. Modern historians ask uncomfortable, challenging questions about this narrative. Were the storms really as devastating as records claim? Or were the Mongols simply terrible sailors operating ships that were poorly constructed? The vessels were built hastily, many using green wood that hadn't properly dried. Chinese and Korean ship designs were mixed without proper coordination. Some historical sources suggest the fleets were already half destroyed before the major storms even arrived. Perhaps the kamikaze was merely the final blow against an invasion that was already doomed to fail. Perhaps the Japanese won as much from the defensive walls, from fierce resistance, from disastrous Mongol logistics and planning as from fortunate weather. But that alternative version doesn't inspire national pride. It doesn't create enduring legends. It doesn't sell the narrative of a divinely protected nation chosen by the gods. Tsushima today is a quiet, peaceful island. Tourists visit the beaches where 80 samurai made their final stand and died. Monuments stand there now, commemorative plaques, museums displaying replicas of Mongol armor and samurai katanas. The descendants of So Sukekuni still live on the island. They maintain the family temple, honor their ancestors who chose death over dishonor. But there's also a memorial plaque for the Mongols, the Koreans, the Chinese, for the 120,000 men who drowned at the bottom of the Sea of Japan. Soldiers who didn't choose this war. Sailors forcibly recruited into service. Families who never learned what happened to their sons and fathers. Because here stands the final uncomfortable truth that we must acknowledge. There were no purely good guys and purely bad guys in this story. There were expanding empires following the logic of conquest. There were warriors following orders from distant rulers. There were men dying for decisions that others made in palaces far away. The 80 samurai of Tsushima were genuinely brave. They were also tools of a feudal system that valued death over life, that prized abstract honor over concrete survival. Heroes and victims simultaneously. The Mongols were brutal invaders who committed atrocities. They were also professional soldiers doing the job expected of them in an era when conquest represented standard imperial policy. And the kamikaze was either a genuine miracle or merely luck, or perhaps just poor Mongol planning combined with unfortunate timing. Or perhaps it was all of these things at once, impossible to separate. History rarely provides clean answers. It offers only events, facts, consequences that we must interpret. 80 samurai against 20,000 Mongol warriors, a battle lasting 3 hours, a war spanning 7 years, a legend enduring 700 years. The blood spilled on Komoda Beach dried centuries ago. The bones lie buried beneath soil and time. The ships rest at the bottom of the ocean, slowly dissolving into sediment. But the questions remain, echoing across centuries. When is it heroic to stay and die? When is it merely foolish? What possesses more value, living with shame or dying with honor intact? Do the gods genuinely intervene in human battles? Or do we simply attribute divine meaning to random weather patterns because we need to believe in something larger than chance? Japan chose to believe in the kamikaze myth. That belief made them feel invincible, made them feel special and chosen and protected by divine forces. And eventually, that same belief led them into wars they couldn't win against enemies who wouldn't conveniently surrender to fortunate storms. The Mongols chose to forget Japan. The islands became merely a footnote, those territories not worth the cost of conquering. A minor failure in the history of an empire that successfully conquered nearly everything else it attempted. And the 80 samurai of Tsushima chose to die when they could have fled. They didn't save Japan through their sacrifice. They didn't defeat the Mongol invasion. They only bought time, sent a warning message, and became enduring symbols of something larger than their individual lives.